Shamshuring, who is the Secretary of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and I'm here to interview him about the G&H economy. So let me start off by asking you a rather fundamental question. Sustainable and equitable economic development is one of the 4 pillars of gross national happiness. What constitutes equity to the Royal Government of Bhutan, and how is it facilitated?
Right. See, when we plan our economic growth activities, our ministry's duty is to ensure that whatever business opportunities are there, it is made as transparent as possible. And so we do not have any policies that will encourage 1 or 2 companies or individuals to grow. So it is basically open to everyone to participate. But on the other hand, of course, a lot of these things are easier said than done, because most of the time, the lower sections of society sometimes may not have access to capital, and so they may not be able to take up business ventures with the same level of participation as one would expect from larger companies. So there, what we are trying to do now is that we are giving greater importance to rural development. We are giving greater importance to micro, small and medium enterprise. And in that respect, recently the government, we have established a new department called the Department of Cottage and Small Industries. The entire purpose of that is to promote basically growth in the remote areas. That is the intention. In our economic development policy, we also bring about a lot of incentives which will encourage growth in the remoter parts of Bhutan. So basically, when we talk about equitable growth, what we want to do is we want to ensure that opportunities are available to all sections of the society by bringing out policies that are inclusive. That is the most important aspect. We would not like to have policies that is targeted towards one section of the society.
Thank you, Ms. Shuring. Also, how is the state limited in size so as not to crowd out the public sector? And I know the private sector is growing, but what proportion would you say was the state sector and what proportion?
Well, if you really look at today, you look at the tax contribution. Mm-hmm. The tax contribution from the private sector is only around 6%. So more from the tax revenue, maximum revenue is coming from the public sector. And that's because if you look at the history of development in Bhutan started only in 1961. Prior to that, we were very much a rural economy, everything more or less barter system and so on. And so a lot of the growth took place with the public sector. And gradually what happened was that by late 1970s, early 80s, the government started divesting the public sector. If I give you examples, shares in the Bank of Bhutan was disinvested. The Royal Insurance Corporation, which was started by the government, were also disinvested. The Pendant Cement Factory, a lot of its shares were disinvested. So what we've been doing now gradually is that more and more, we would like to encourage more and more participation of the private sector. I think I would actually like to maybe reverse the question that you had raised. It is not crowding out the public sector. Rather, we would not like to crowd out the private sector. We would like to reduce the participation of public sector undertakings, more and more, so that private sector can find a greater place. No, excuse me.
No problem. Should I pause it?
No, I'll just put it off. Just excuse me. Hello. Imbaga. Yeah, check now. Okay. Today I better advance na adjust better slabda. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
That's all right. So you were saying that you'd like to encourage the participation?
Yes, we would like to encourage more and more participation of the private sector. Now, government companies, public undertakings, their involvement should be more and more in strategic areas. Where there are monopolies, that we would have basically expect government to play a major role in state monopolies. No? And as long as it is a competitive environment, we would like the public sector undertakings to play, withdraw more and more and allow the private sector to participate more in those areas.
So how is this being incentivized?
Well, how this is being incentivized is that if you look at many areas where there are of strategic importance, those we give directly to the public sector undertakings. For instance, if you take into account today the hydropower development. Hydropower development is very much of strategic importance to the government, and so the main player there is the government companies. Similarly, the telecommunication was started as a government company, Bhutan Telecommunication. But now, in the telecom sector was open to the private sector, and so biddings were announced in which Bhutan Telecom was not allowed to participate at that time. So what we are doing now is wherever there are where we see that private sector can play a big role, we would like to ensure that there is a level playing field, and we will not land up giving any preference to government undertakings. In fact, to the extent sometimes we will even come out with, if where it is necessary, we may even debar the participation of government undertakings.
Okay, so there's sort of antitrust movements against one's own monopolies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but monopolies are now, of course, we would like to do away with monopolies to the extent possible. But if they are natural monopolies, there is nothing you can do about it. So natural monopolies, in order to take into account the interest of the public, then there is the regulator comes on board.
True.
So I can give you the example of the electricity distribution in the Bhutan Power Corporation, which is you can't have so many distribution companies because you can't have so many wires going around the country. So this is a natural monopoly, and so in a natural monopoly, the electricity regulator will regulate the tariff, because this is of what is interest to the consumers. We could not have a situation where the natural monopoly will keep on increasing the tariff just to have greater profit margins.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was very interesting because you said that 6% of the tax comes from the private sector.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of Bhutan is, well, a lot of Bhutan's economy is dependent on aid and official development assistance.
Right.
So how does one broaden the tax base? Because Linchin said that he wants to make Bhutan aid independent to a large extent by 2020.
Right.
Like he said at the roundtable meeting. So how does one achieve that and widen the tax base without there being this sort of, what happens with aid is that there's a rising expectation for services when one begins to pay tax, whereas the aid had covered those services and now the taxpayer has to take over. So how does one achieve that, and how does one achieve self-sufficiency?
You participated in RTM, right?
Yes.
I gave a presentation, if you recall, on the economic development of Bhutan. I don't know whether you were in that.
The morning session.
It was in the second day in the morning.
Yes, I missed it, sorry. You missed
it. So there, basically, I had made a presentation on what we are doing in order to stimulate economic growth in Bhutan, in order to achieve economic self-reliance. The first and foremost is that the government approved a very important document called the Economic Development Policy 2010. Now, the promoter of that document was our ministry, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, but it is a national document because there were countrywide consultations held with all sections of the society. All the concerned, all the ministries of the government were involved, the cabinet was involved, the Prime Minister himself was involved, and ultimately this document was approved. The primary aim of this document are of twofold. One is to ensure that we achieve economic self-reliance by 2020. The second is to ensure that we have full employment. So these are two very important goals that we have in the EDP. And so now, how do we achieve economic self-reliance? Which means that our dependence on donor assistance would not be there anymore by 2020. So now, how do we ensure that we are no longer dependent on donor assistance? So what we are trying to do is, we are trying to diversify the economic base. Right now, we are highly dependent on hydropower. Hydropower is the main resource, but our dependence on hydropower will continue. I mean, water is a natural resource that we have, and we should use whatever resources that we have to the best of our advantage. There is no point in allowing the rivers to flow if you are not able to derive the benefits out of it. So hydropower will continue to be the main economic resource of Bhutan. Today, almost 40% of our national revenue comes from export of electricity.
True. And
our gross revenues from export of electricity is around a little over $200 million a year. Now this will reach, by the year 2020, we hope to reach the earnings from electricity to 2 billion a year.
Wow.
So today, if you look at our GDP, our GDP is about $1 billion a year. That is our total GDP, in which hydropower accounts for about 19 to 20% of the GDP. In the year 2020, hydropower alone, the revenue from hydropower alone is going to go over $2 billion US dollars in terms of revenue alone. So you can see, what would be the impact on our economy. So hydropower would be a very strong base, which will, in many ways, allow us to achieve this economic self-reliance. The challenge with hydropower, of course, is that it does not help us to achieve the second goal, to create employment.
True.
And employment can only be possible if we have a diversified economic base. And so we realize that for a landlocked country like Bhutan, our forte is in the service sector and not in the manufacturing sector. Because manufacturing, if you look at it, if you look at the location of Bhutan, we have China in the north, India in the south, two very large populations of over 1 billion people each. So we will not be able to compete in any manufacturing process which is labor intensive. At the same time, transportation cost into Bhutan is very expensive. We are 1,000 kilometers away from the nearest seaport, that is Calcutta. So keeping those factors in mind, we really need to see where our economic opportunities lie. And so our economic opportunities, we realize, are basically in the service sector. Now, what are the service sectors that we would like to concentrate and take advantage of? Basically, the tourism will play a very big role. Tourism has been continuing to grow over the last few years. Now government has a target of to achieve 100,000 tourists by 2013. And I believe we have already reached well over 60,000 tourists as compared to 30,000 tourists maybe a year ago. So tourism has the opportunity to create a lot of employment in all sectors, transportation to the the hospitality sector, and even in the rural areas where rural economies will also benefit through tourism. Another area that we see a lot of opportunities in the ICT, because our vision in the economic development policy is to be to develop an economy that is driven by a knowledge-based economy, and it should be a green economy, and ultimately we should be able to provide the right direction, by following a sustainable path. That is the whole objective. And today, if you look at Bhutan, what is our strength? Our strength, one is our environment. We place very high emphasis on our environment. Even in our constitution, there is a requirement to maintain 60% forest coverage for all times to come. And then the whole idea of GNH today. Now, Bhutan's name in the outside world as someone who has been promoting happiness, that is increasingly becoming more and more recognized. The recent UN resolution of happiness being part of development, I think that itself would have a big effect as far as the name of Bhutan is concerned. So the emphasis on GNAs, the environmental aspect, the big values that we place on our culture and so on, all these aspects we would like to classify them under what we call a brand Bhutan. And this is something that we would use as our USP, unique selling proposition, to sell ourselves. And that is why the cultural industries will play a major role. It will also provide tremendous opportunities. Now, a lot of, when you talk about cultural industries, what are they? There are traditional arts and crafts. We have the 13, Zorik Chusum is the 13 traditional arts and crafts, to do with things like painting, from carpentry, from pottery work, and various things. Now these, if we can develop it well, it will have we will be able to create a niche for ourselves. It will become an exportable item. It will also become an area where tourists can come and see how things are being produced locally in Bhutan. And agriculture is another area where we see a lot of opportunities. And in agriculture, you may say that, oh, but only about 7 or 8% of the country is arable. So how do you intend to make agriculture an economic opportunity? Here we would like to go under the brand of organic branding. So while our yields may be low in terms of productivity, we would expect high yields in terms of pricing.
True.
Because the moment you have an organic brand, today people are all concerned about chemicals, pesticides, all sorts of things which are not which are not good for your health. And so if we can promote this organic branding properly, we would be able to find a market for ourselves. Of late, if you look at some of the initiatives that have been taken in the agriculture sector in eastern Bhutan, in partnership with Ministry of Agriculture and an American company called Mountain Hazelnut Ventures, we have started a hazelnut production in eastern Bhutan. And there the growth is all going to take place in fallow land, where the company is nurturing the seedlings, and once it comes to a particular size, it is distributed to the farmers free of cost. And with the agreement that once this starts fruiting, they will sell the product to the farmers. So hazelnut is also one area which I would expect in another 2-3 years the fruiting will start. Then in southern area we have allowed a big coffee plantation to come up. And likewise there are many other areas where agriculture could play a big role. Now government is also allowing contract farming. We are allowing cooperatives to be formed. So a lot of the farmers are now, whether you can call them a milk cooperative or an egg, poultry cooperative, all these are now providing dividends. So agriculture will play a big role. ICT will also play a big role in Bhutan, because Bhutan is an ideal area for electronics. The temperature is perfect. We have the first IT park will be open in Bhutan end of this month, where we would expect some brand name IT firms from outside to locate their facilities within Bhutan. So
have
we have
approached you?
Yeah, I think the Ministry of Information and Communication has already been going on a lot of road shows. So we would expect